A black woman's handcuffs in a Louisiana gas station lot set a nation on fire, exposing truths no one could unsee. It was January 10th, 2025, and General Amara Brooks, a four-star U.S. Army officer, stood by a rental car in Mosswood, Louisiana, her secure phone pressed to her ear, oblivious to the storm about to break. The air was heavy, thick with southern heat that clung like a second skin. At 38, Mara was a study in quiet power, short curls tucked under a navy cap, her lean frame in jeans, sneakers, and an olive jacket, nothing betraying her rank. Her brown eyes, sharp as a falcon's, scanned the cracked lot of Kelly's Fuel and Food, a forgotten stop off Highway 171 where pickups idled and locals traded stories in the sticky haze. Mara had driven this route before, Lake Charles to Shreveport, no escorts, just a deadline for a classified briefing at Barksdale Air Force Base. But her phone's signal faltered, forcing her to pull over. She stepped out, pacing for reception, her boots kicking gravel, her voice low as she verified her identity to a Pentagon officer. The briefing was sensitive, classified movements, real-time orders, words meant for a select few. Inside the station, Karen Holt, mid-50s, watched from behind the counter, her blonde bun tight, her frown carved deep from years of judging outsiders. She didn't see a general or a woman on a call. She saw trouble, a black stranger who didn't belong. Her hand grabbed the landline, dialing the Mosswood Police Department. "Got a suspicious woman by the pumps," she whispered, her voice sharp. "Looks like trouble, maybe drugs. Y'all come quick." She hung up, a smirk curling her lips, pleased with the chaos she'd sparked. Across town, Officers Travis Merrow and Kyle Vance heard the call, their cruiser parked under a sagging magnolia. Merrow, 35, buzz-cut, broad-shouldered, craved action to break Mosswood's monotony. Vance, younger, lean, with a cocky grin, followed his lead, eager to flex their power. They sped toward Kelly's, tires spitting dust, sunglasses flashing. Mara, still on her call, didn't notice until red and blue lights bounced off the station's grimy windows. She lowered her phone, squinting, her pulse steady but wary. The cruiser screeched to a halt, gravel flying, and Merrow jumped out, unholstering his gun with a flick. Vance mirrored him, his hand on his belt, both moving like hunters circling prey. Mara set her phone on the car hood, her hands visible, palms open, her West Point training a calm anchor. "Good afternoon, officers," she said, her voice even, controlled. "How can I assist you?" Merrow barked, "License and registration now." Mara nodded, reaching slowly for her wallet, her movements deliberate. "I'm active-duty military, General Amara Brooks, on official business." She pulled her military ID and federal travel orders, extending them with steady hands. Vance scoffed. "General? You serious?" Merrow snatched the documents, barely glancing before tossing them onto the hood. "Fake," he said, his voice hard. Mara blinked, a jolt of disbelief cracking her calm. "Sir, I assure you," she began, but Vance cut her off. "Shut it," he snapped, stepping closer. "You picked the wrong town, lady." A crowd formed, locals, drivers, a teenager with a soda, whispering, some chuckling, phones slipping out to record. Mara's training urged de-escalation, but her gut knew these men weren't listening. "Please contact your supervisor," she said, her voice firm. "You're making a serious error." Merrow smirked, pulling cuffs from his belt. "Turn around, hands behind your back." Mara stood still, her eyes locked on his, a fire igniting inside. "I am a general in the United States Army," she said, her words sharp now. "You are unlawfully detaining me." Merrow laughed, the sound grating, drawing the crowd's attention. "Yeah, and I'm the president. Move." Before Mara could respond, Vance grabbed her arm, twisting it. Merrow forced her other wrist back, the cuffs snapping tight, metal biting her skin. Mara clenched her jaw, swallowing a surge of humiliation. Her phone fell, the Pentagon's voice shouting her name, ignored by the officers. Merrow shoved her against the car, the door rattling, gasps rippling through the crowd. "Got her," Vance said, grinning like they'd won a prize. Mara stared at the station's smudged window, her reflection broken, a general reduced to nothing. Karen Holt watched from the door, arms crossed, her smirk triumphant. But in Washington, alarms blared in the Pentagon, A drop call from a four-star general triggering a response that would shake Mosswood to its core. As Mara sat on the curb, cuffed, her eyes burned with a promise. This wasn't the end. The crowd's phones kept rolling, capturing a spark that would soon set the nation alight. The cuffs cut into General Amara Brooks's wrists, a cold reminder that rank meant nothing in Mosswood's gaze. It was January 10th, 2025, and the sun baked the lot of Kelly's fuel and gas, the Louisiana air heavy with gasoline and spite. Mara, 38, sat on the curb, her blue jacket scuffed, her short curls damp under her navy cap. A four-star general, her brown eyes held a quiet storm, her lean frame steady despite the humiliation. Her West Point training kept her spine straight, but inside, a raw wound opened, not just from the cuffs, but from being unseen in a nation she'd bled for. Officer Travis Merrow loomed, his buzz cut gleaming, his broad shoulders casting a shadow. "What's your real deal, huh?" he demanded, his voice thick with scorn. Officer Kyle Vance, leaner, younger, with a smirk, leaned in, his boots scuffing gravel. "You're no general." Mara exhaled, her voice calm. "You have my ID, my orders. Check them." Merrow snorted, kicking dust toward her sneakers. "You're one lie away from booking." Mara stayed silent, her gaze on the cracked pavement, refusing to give them the fight they hungered for. The crowd grew, locals leaning on trucks, a clerk snapping photos, their murmurs a low buzz of malice. Karen Holtz stood by the station door, her blonde bun tight, her smirk a badge of victory. She'd ignited this, her call to police painting Mara as a threat. Mara's secure phone lay in the dirt, its cracked screen dark, but its last words echoed in her mind. A Pentagon officer, cut off. She knew Washington was listening, but here, she was alone, her stars invisible. In the Pentagon's command center, Lieutenant Commander Seth Kane, 29, wiry, stared at a blinking line labeled Hawk Secure. His voice tightened. "General Brooks, do you copy?" Static answered, shouts fading to silence. He glanced at Colonel Evelyn Ward, 50s, her gray hair pulled back, her eyes narrowing as she strode over. "Ping her location," she ordered, her voice cutting through the room's hum. A technician traced the signal, a dot on Highway 171, Mosswood, a gas station far from Barksdale. "Get Barksdale security," Ward said, her jaw tight. "Patch me to Jag." In Mosswood, Vance squatted, his breath sharp. "Who are you working for?" Mara's eyes flicked to him, steady. "The United States Army. Call your supervisor." Merrow laughed, a harsh bark that drew the crowd's eyes. "Lady, you're done." He radioed dispatch, smug. "Female suspect, early 30s, uncooperative." Mara's fingers twitched, her training urging calm. But the cuffs, the weight of being erased, pressed harder. She'd faced war, advised presidents, but this small-town cruelty stung deeper. Karen watched, her arms crossed, her smirk fading as a teenager's video uploaded, the clip pinging across social media. Mara didn't know, her focus on the officers, their boots closing in. "You'll regret this," she said, her voice low of vow. Merrow smirked, but Vance's grin wavered, a crack in his bravado. The crowd's phones buzzed, capturing Mara's face, unbroken, against the chaos. Then, Merrow's radio crackled. "Unit 472, confirmed detainee." Merrow grinned, responding, but the dispatcher's voice cut through, subject flagged federal. "Pentagon orders. Release immediately." Merrow's face paled, his keys fumbling. Vance froze, his mouth open. Mara stood as the cuffs fell, her wrists red, her gaze piercing. "You made a choice," she said, her voice deadly calm. Merrow muttered a half apology, eyes darting, but Mara didn't answer, retrieving her phone, its cracked screen a scar. The crowd hushed, Karen slipping inside, her confidence shaken. Tires screamed in the distance, black SUVs tearing through Mosswood's haze, Barksdale's response closing in. Mara stood taller, her cap steady, knowing the world would soon see who she was and what they'd done. Black SUVs roared into Kelly's fuel and gas lot, tires spitting gravel like shrapnel, shattering Mosswood's smug quiet. It was January 10th, 2025, and General Amara Brooks stood by her rental car, her wrists raw from cuffs now gone, her brown eyes blazing under a navy cap. The Louisiana sun scorched the cracked pavement, the air thick with diesel and dread. At 38, Mara was a four-star general, her short curls damp, her lean frame steady in jeans and a scuffed olive jacket. Her calm, forged in battle, held firm, but a fire burned within, fueled by officers who dared to strip her dignity. Officer Travis Merrow fumbled his radio, his buzz cut slick with sweat, his arrogance crumbling as the Pentagon's orders echoed. Release her. Officer Kyle Vance, pale behind sunglasses, shifted, his cocky grin vanished. The crowd, locals, drivers, a kid with a phone, fell silent, their whispers dying as the SUVs screeched to a halt. Lieutenant Colonel Nathan Cole, mid-40s, sharp-eyed, stepped out, his khakis crisp, a folder under his arm. His gaze locked on Mara, his voice ablate. General Brooks, are you injured? Mara shook her head, her voice steady. Minor abrasions, Colonel. Their careers took the real hit. Cole's team fanned out, Air Force security forming a wall between Mara and the Mosswood cops. Merrow stammered. We didn't know. Cole cut him off, his eyes cold. You had her credentials. You chose ignorance. Vance tried, his voice thin. She looked suspicious. Cole's stare was a verdict, his words slow. You saw a black woman on a phone and made a call that'll haunt you. Inside the station, Karen Holt peered through the door, her blonde bun fraying, her smirk replaced by fear. She'd sparked this, her call a noose tightening. The crowd's phones kept filming, the video spreading, a spark catching fire online. Mara retrieved her badge from the car hood, her movements deliberate, her rank a quiet thunder. She looked at Merrow, then Vance, her voice low. You'll regret this. Today. Merrow's jaw twitched, but he said nothing, his hands shaking. Cole turned to his team, his voice clipped. Secure the general, clear the area. The officers moved like clockwork, guiding Mara to an SUV, her boots steady on the gravel. She glanced at the station, Karen's silhouette shrinking, the crowd's murmurs fading. As the convoy pulled away, Mara sat in the back seat, her hands clasped, the highway stretching ahead. Cole broke the silence, his voice low. Pentagon's launching a full investigation. Civil Rights Division, DOJ. This won't stay quiet. Mara nodded, her eyes on the passing pines. They should have known better, she said, her voice soft but steel. The SUV's radio crackled, reports of a viral video. #Mosswood Injustice trending. She didn't flinch, her mind replaying the cuffs, Merrow's laughter, the weight of being unseen. At Barksdale, she'd faced debriefs, a reckoning. For now, she watched Louisiana's heartland blur, a reminder of battles fought and the one she'd wage. In Mosswood, the crowd lingered, phones buzzing, the video's views climbing. Karen slipped into the back office, her hands trembling, the weight of her actions settling. Merrow and Vance stood by their cruiser, silent, their badges tarnished. The SUVs were gone, but the air crackled, a storm brewing. Online, a black general's arrest was no longer a secret. It was a cry for justice, spreading like wildfire, and Mara's voice was the spark that would light the way. The video of General Mara Brooks in cuffs tore through the internet like a hurricane, each view a nail in Mosswood's crumbling facade. It was January 11th, 2025, and Mara sat in a stark debriefing room at Barksdale Air Force Base, her khaki uniform crisp, her brown eyes sharp despite yesterday's wound. At 38, a four-star general, her short curls free, her lean frame a pillar of resilience. Her medals glinted, a silent rebuke to the chaos in Mosswood, but inside, a knot tightened, not just the humiliation, but the betrayal of a nation she'd served for 2 decades. The world was waking to her story. The grainy clip, 30 seconds of officers Travis Merrow and Kyle Vance cuffing a calm, credentialed black woman, had exploded, hitting 20 million views. Hashtags like #JusticeForBrooks and #MosswoodInjustice trended, tweets pouring in from veterans, activists, and strangers who saw their pain in Mara's steady gaze. In Baton Rouge, reporter Lauren Hayes, 29, quick-witted, watched the video on her phone, her fingers flying over her laptop. She filed a story for The Advocate, her words sharp. 4-star general detained in Mosswood. Bias or blunder? By noon, CNN picked it up, the nation's eyes turning to a speck off Highway 171. At Barksdale, Mara faced a Pentagon liaison, Major Ruiz, his notepad open, his questions careful. General, walk us through it. Mara's voice was steady, recounting the stop, the cuffs, Marrow's sneer, her restraint. But inside, she thought of her father, a Vietnam vet, his stories of prejudice, and wondered how little had changed. Ruiz nodded, his pen pausing. The video's viral. Pentagon's with DOJ. This is big. In Mosswood, Karen Holt locked herself in her apartment above the station, the gas station's neon a faint glow below. Her phone buzzed with angry texts, neighbors, cousins, calling her out as the clerk who'd started it. Her blonde hair hung loose, her hands shaking as she scrolled X, the video looping endlessly. She'd seen trouble in Mara, but now the world saw her shame, her name trending for all the wrong reasons. She wanted to scream, to defend herself, but the weight of her judgment pressed harder. Marrow and Vance, holed up at Marrow's trailer, watched news anchors dissect their names. Marrow, his buzz cut damp, downed a beer, his bravado gone. Vance paced, his sunglasses useless against exposure. We didn't know, Marrow muttered. Vance snapped. They're making us monsters. But the video didn't lie. Mara's credentials, tossed. Her voice, ignored. Their radios were silent, their badges heavy, the department's silence a warning. Mara left the debrief, her boots clicking down Barksdale's halls, the base a fortress of urgency. She passed a TV, her face flashing, protesters outside Mosswood's police station chanting. A young airman saluted, his eyes fierce, and she nodded, her chest tight. At night, alone in her quarters, she sat by the window, Louisiana's stars bright. The video replayed in her mind. Her cuffs, the crowd's laughter, her defiance. She'd fought battles, but this was different, a wound demanding a reckoning. By morning, the story was everywhere, MSNBC, Fox, BBC. Lauren Hayes arrived in Mosswood, her camera crew capturing the town square, where a small protest grew, signs demanding justice. In the Pentagon, Colonel Evelyn Ward pushed for action, her voice ablade. This isn't just Brooks. It's every soldier. The DOJ opened a civil rights probe, and Mosswood's police chief faced a press conference. Mara stood, her uniform crisp, her resolve hardening. The world was watching, and she wasn't done. As she stepped into the next meeting, a call came. Chief Leonard Tate was about to speak, and her story was far from over. Mosswood's town hall smelled of stale coffee and fear as Chief Leonard Tate faced a swarm of cameras, his cowboy hat wilting under the glare of January 12, 2025. The Louisiana heat pressed against the windows, but the real pressure was inside, where Tate, 60s, grizzled, gripped the podium, his jaw lined with regret. He'd dodged trouble for years, but General Amara Brooks's arrest had turned his town into a crucible, her cuffs a viral indictment of his failures. 2 days ago, Mara, a 38-year-old four-star general, sat in cuffs at Kelly's Fuel and Gas, her dignity mocked by officers Tate hadn't controlled. Now, in a Barksdale briefing room, Mara watched Tate's press conference on a flickering screen, her khaki uniform sharp, her short curls free, her brown eyes burning. A black woman who'd risen from Atlanta's projects, her medals mapped her sacrifice. Tate's words cut deep, a refusal to name the rot. Tate's voice shook, his eyes dodging the crowd. We regret the misunderstanding, he said, avoiding arrest. Reporters flared. Officers Travis Marrow and Kyle Vance are on leave, pending review. Lauren Hayes, 29, sharp, cut in. Why did your officers ignore General Brooks's credentials? Was race a factor? Tate flushed, muttering about tensions, his excuses flimsy. The room buzzed, flashes popping. The truth laid bare. Mosswood's rot ran deep. In a trailer park, Marrow and Vance watched, their beers warm, badges on a cluttered table. Marrow's fists clenched, sweat on his brow. Vance paced, his bravado gone. They're throwing us under, Marrow growled. Vance snapped. We followed protocol. But the video, at 50 million views, showed otherwise. Mara's ID, tossed. Her voice, drowned. Old complaints surfaced. Force, slurs, leaked, their pasts unraveling. At Barksdale, Mara met Major Patel Wells, a wiry lawyer in her 40s, eyes fierce. DOJ's on board, Patel said. Civil rights violation, federal probe. Ready to speak. Mara nodded, her fingers brushing a medal from a rock, memories of comrades fueling her. "This is bigger than me," she said, her voice low. "They need to see it's everyone." Patel agreed, outlining a response. In Mosswood, Karen Holt hid in her apartment, her phone off, her blonde bun undone. The town scorned her, her call a mark of shame. She saw Mara's face on CNN, a pang of doubt. Had she misjudged? Protests grew. A church marched, Lauren's lens capturing their pain. Mosswood wasn't a speck. It was a scar, bleeding on screens. Mara left the briefing, her boots echoing, airmen saluting with pride. At dusk, she stood by a window, the sky ablaze. Tate's Dodge burned, his refusal to truth, stoking her fire. Alone, she replayed the cuffs, her defiance a symbol now. The DOJ deepened its probe, a national anchor called. By dawn, the story was global, Reuters, ABC. Mara stood, her uniform a shield. Tate's failure had exposed Mosswood, and she'd planned her voice. A call confirmed, a national outlet wanted her live, and Mara's truth was ready to ignite. The nation was a tinderbox, and General Mara Brooks's story was the match that set it alight. It was January 14th, 2025, and Mara stood in a Barksdale briefing room, her khaki uniform sharp, her brown eyes fierce under the stark lights. At 38, a four-star general, a black woman, her short curls framed a face etched with purpose, her medals a chronicle of battles fought. The viral video, her arrest at Kelly's Fuel, had hit 70 million views, fueling protests from Seattle to Atlanta, each cry for justice a heartbeat in her chest. The world was a tempest. In Chicago, marchers filled Grant Park, signs reading Brooks stands swaying in the cold. In Houston, veterans rallied, voices hoarse. On X, #JusticeForMara trended globally, strangers sharing stories of bias, their pain weaving into hers. Reporter Lauren Hayes, 29, filed a CBS report from Mosswood Square, her voice sharp. "This isn't one woman's fight. It's a call to see." Her words lit screens, fanning flames. Colonel Evelyn Ward, 50s, met Mara, her gray eyes sharp. "DOJ's all in," she said, her voice ablade. "FBI, civil rights, White House briefings. You're the core." Mara nodded, her fingers tracing a medal from Afghanistan, her father's Vietnam tales grounding her. "It's for them," she said, her voice fierce. Ward agreed, but Mara paused, the weight of speaking, raw, unfiltered, stirring doubt. She'd faced death, but this was a nation, waiting. In Mosswood, Chief Leonard Tate cowered after his failed press conference, his badge tarnished. Officers Travis Merrow and Kyle Vance, suspended, faced old complaints, brutality, profiling, splashed across headlines. Lauren's stories exposed Mosswood's rot. Karen Holt, trapped in her apartment, stared at a muted TV, her blonde hair a mess, her phone silent. The town despised her, her call a mark of shame. She saw Mara's face on CBS, a pang of guilt. Had she misjudged? Mosswood's protests, a church choir's march, Lauren's camera capturing hope, raw. Mara walked Barksdale's grounds, her boots steady, airmen saluting with pride. She thought of her sister, a teacher who'd texted, "You're our fire." She met Major Patel, planning her speech. "No scripts," Mara said, her voice iron. "They need it raw." Patel nodded, a spark. The DOJ called, probe deepening. A national anchor wanted her live. By morning, the story was a tidal wave. Guardian, CNN, front pages. Mara stood, her uniform a shield, protests a chorus. She'd speak at Barksdale, her truth a sword. A call confirmed. February 18th press conference, cameras poised. Mosswood's edge was open. Mara's voice would carve truth, a general leading a nation's reckoning. Barksdale Air Force Base pulsed with a restless energy on February 18th, 2025, as General Mara Brooks prepared to face a nation fractured by her story. The Louisiana sun scorched the base, its heat curling into the briefing rooms, where Mara stood, her khaki uniform pristine, her brown eyes sharp. At 38, a four-star general, a black woman, her short curls framed a face of unyielding resolve, her medals gleaming like a battle standard. The viral video, 80 million views, her arrest at Kelly's Fuel, had ignited protests, her name a beacon for justice burning in her chest. Reporters swarmed the gates, cameras a wall of anticipation. In D.C., protesters filled the mall, signs reading Mara speaks, rising high. On X, hashtag Justice for Mara trended, stories of pain weaving a tapestry. Mara stood in her quarters, her fingers brushing a photo of her parents, her father a vet, her mother a fighter, her legacy their fire. She'd rejected the Pentagon's scripted lines, her words raw, ready to cut. Colonel Evelyn Ward met Mara, her voice steady. "The world's waiting," she said, her gray eyes fierce. "DOJ's hitting Mosswood. Your voice sets the stage." Mara nodded, a memory of her first command, soldiers in chaos, grounding her. "No masks," she said. "They get truth." Ward nodded, a spark of pride. In Mosswood, Karen Holt hid in her trailer, blinds shut, her blonde hair loose, her life unraveling. The town shunned her, her call a mark of shame. She watched CNN, Mara's face a mirror, a pang of regret. Had she misjudged? Mosswood's square split. Protesters chanting, locals clashing, Lauren Hayes' story, Mosswood's shame, raw and jagged. Officers Travis Merrow and Kyle Vance, outcasts in Merrow's dim hideout, watched, the TV glowing. Merrow's eyes hollow, Vance slumped, bravado gone. Their suspension was a formality, old complaints burying them. "We didn't know," Merrow whispered. But the video, Mara's credentials, mocked, played, their shame eternal. The DOJ's probe tightened. Mara walked to the gate, her boots firm, airmen saluting with pride. The crowd, reporters, veterans, locals, hummed. She thought of her daughter, a vow for a better world. She met Major Patel, Patel's eyes fierce. "You've got this." Mara nodded. For them. Lauren stood ready, her story poised. The Pentagon pushed, Ward's voice a spur. "This is America." As Mara neared the podium, cameras flashed, the air electric, her heart a drum, ready to lead truth. The Louisiana sun blazed on February 18th, 2025, as General Mara Brooks stepped to the podium outside Barksdale Air Force Base, her voice a thunderclap ready to shatter silence. At 38, a four-star general, her khaki uniform was a shield, her short curls framing a face of defiance, her brown eyes cutting through the crowd. Her medals gleamed, each a scar of battles fought, but her words, raw, unscripted, would wage a new war. The viral video of her arrest at Kelly's Fuel, now at 120 million views, had set cities aflame, protests from Boston to LA, her name a cry for justice that roared in her chest. The crowd was a tapestry, reporters scribbling, veterans saluting, families with signs reading Mara stands. In Chicago, marchers filled the loop, chanting her name. On X, hashtag Justice for Mara surged, stories of injustice flooding in. Mara gripped the microphone, her breath steady, her mother's courage, a nurse facing hate, her anchor. "I'm General Amara Brooks," she began, her voice clear, slicing through the hum. "For 28 years, I've served, leading, defending ideals. But in Mosswood, none of it mattered." Her words landed, the crowd still. "I was judged, not by my service, not my character, but my skin, by assumptions that cuffed me." Reporters wept, airmen nodded, fists tight. She spoke of betrayal, the cuffs, the silence, her voice raw. "I'm not here for pity," she said, eyes fierce. "Silence kills truth. Accountability matters. Dignity matters. They're not negotiable." In Mosswood, Travis Merrow and Kyle Vance watched from a dive bar, the TV casting shadows. Merrow's hands shook, Vance's jaw clenched, eyes wide. The video, Mara's dignity, crushed, played, their careers ash. They'd heard. DOJ charges looming, their names poison. "She's right," Merrow whispered, a crack in his denial. Vance stared, silent. Karen Holt watched from her trailer, her TV muted, her blonde hair a tangle, guilt piercing. Had she ruined a hero? Mosswood Square pulsed, protesters singing, locals divided. Lauren Hayes' story, Mara's truth, streamed live, the divide stark. At Barksdale, the crowd roared, veterans cheering, a girl waving a flag. Mara's voice soared. "Injustice thrives in silence. Change comes when we see." She paused, her gaze sweeping. "I wasn't humiliated. They were." Applause erupted, a tidal wave. She stepped back, no questions, her truth complete, steps steady. In the Pentagon, Colonel Ward nodded, proud. The DOJ pushed, legal wheels turning. Mara walked back through Barksdale's gates, cheers echoing, airmen saluting. She thought of her son, a fight for his future. A movement began, petitions, rallies. As she entered a hall, a call came. Activists wanted her, a vision growing, her fight a war just begun. Mosswood, Louisiana, crumbled under the weight of its own shame, as General Amara Brooks's truth reshaped the nation. On February 25, 2025, Mara sat in a Barksdale meeting room, her khaki uniform crisp, her brown eyes steady, a quiet storm. At 38, a four-star general, her short curls framed resilience, her medals scars of battles won. Her speech, now at 200 million views, had sparked a movement, rallies in Denver, vigils in Philly, her voice a call to justice echoing in every heart. The DOJ's probe tore into Mosswood, suspending officers Travis Merrow and Kyle Vance, their names synonymous with disgrace. In D.C., DOJ lawyers met Mara, files open, civil charges, federal oversight. She nodded, her fingers brushing a letter from a student, her resolve iron. She thought of her brother, lost to a protest, his loss or fire. This is for them, she said, her voice fierce. In Mosswood, Chief Leonard Tate resigned, his cowboy hat discarded, badge a relic. The town hall was silent, regret heavy. Protesters filled the square, a choir singing, Lauren Hayes' story Mosswood Falls, a global headline. The town split, some mourning locals, others joining the cause, Mara's speech a mirror. Karen Holt, exiled in her trailer, stared at her hands, blonde hair graying, shame a cage. She saw Mara's face on NBC, a pang of guilt. Had she been blind? She wanted to speak, but the town's hate silenced her. Merrow and Vance, jobless, faced court, their trailer a tomb, the video haunting, Mara's truth, their guilt. Mara met activists at Barksdale, their eyes fierce. "You're our spark," a woman said. Mara nodded, heart full, leadership grounding her. The Pentagon pressed, Colonel Evelyn Ward's voice a spur. Systemic reform. The White House vowed change, a policy review born. Mara walked the grounds, airmen saluting, her mind on her child, a future to fight for. By dusk, the story roared. BBC, Globe, a global pulse. Mara stood in her quarters, protests a tide. She'd met planners, a rally forming. The DOJ charged, a movement swelling. Mara's truth was a fire, the nation burning, a general leading the charge. The fight for justice became a war, and General Amara Brooks was its unrelenting commander. On February 15, 2025, Mara stood in a DOJ office in D.C., her suit sharp, her brown eyes blazing, a beacon of resolve. At 38, a four-star general, her short curls framed a face etched with defiance, her presence a reminder of battles fought from deserts to this room. The viral video of her arrest at Kelly's Fuel, now at 250 million views, had fueled a movement. Rallies in Miami, marches in Oakland, Mara's name a call to arms that pulsed in her veins. In Mosswood, the DOJ's probe tightened, officers Travis Merrow and Kyle Vance facing federal indictments, their lives unraveling. Mara sat with DOJ agents, her testimony precise, her voice steady as she recounted the cuffs, the mockery, the betrayal. They saw a black woman, not a general, she said, her words heavy. She thought of her mother, a teacher who'd faced slurs, her strength Mara's shield. The agents nodded, files growing, a case building to reshape justice. Back in Mosswood, the town was a fracture. Protesters filled the square, a gospel choir's song rising, Lauren Hayes' story Mosswood's trial, hitting NPR, raw and urgent. Some locals, clinging to old ways, defended the officers, but others joined the chants. Mara's truth a wedge splitting the town. Karen Holt, holed up in her trailer, watched MSNBC, her blonde hair gone gray, her eyes wet. Guilt, a truth she couldn't escape. She'd sparked this, now a shadow in a town turning on itself. Mara returned to Barksdale, meeting a young officer, her eyes wide with awe. "You showed me strength," she said. Mara smiled, mentoring, her voice soft but firm. "Your voice is your power." The Pentagon pushed, Colonel Evelyn Ward's call a spur. "You're changing policy." Mara nodded, walking the base, airmen saluting, her mind on her son, a future to forge. Lauren's follow-up story kept the pressure on, her lens on Merrow and Vance's court dates, a nation watching. In Mosswood, the police department faltered, staff quitting, Tate's legacy ash. Mara filed a lawsuit, her dignity a weapon, the DOJ seeking reform. By night, the story was a global drumbeat. Al Jazeera, BBC, protests swelling. Mara stood, her quarters a sanctuary, resolve a fire kindled. A lawsuit loomed, and Mara's fight was a new war, ready to burn brighter. Mosswood, Louisiana, stood at a crossroads, its soul torn open by General Mara Brooks's truth. On February 22, 2025, Mara stepped into a Mosswood High School gymnasium, her khaki uniform a stark contrast to the faded bleachers, her brown eyes warm but unyielding. At 38, a four-star general, a black woman, her short curls framed a face of resilience, her medals a quiet challenge to a town wrestling with its shame. The viral video of her arrest at Kelly's Fuel, now at 300 million views, had fueled a movement, its echoes in the students' wide eyes, their whispers a chorus of awe. Mara's presence was a spark, her story a fire that refused to die. The town was a battleground, its square alive with protesters chanting for justice, their signs a sea of color against the gray courthouse. A gospel choir's hymn rose, a plea for healing, but some locals clung to defiance, rallying for officers Travis Merrow and Kyle Vance, their indictments a wound to old pride. Lauren Hayes, 29, stood at the crowd's edge, her camera crew capturing the clash, her story Mosswood's heart, hitting CNN, its raw honesty cutting through the noise. Mara's speech had split the town, forcing it to face its reflection, and the gymnasium was her next stage. Inside, Mara faced rows of teenagers, their faces a mix of curiosity and hope. She stood at a makeshift podium, her voice steady, a beacon in the dim light. "You are the future," she said, her words clear, resonant. "Your voice can shatter silence, build a world where no one is judged by their skin." A girl in the front row, braids tight, raised her hand, her question bold. "How do you keep going?" Mara smiled, her eyes softening, a memory of her own youth, Atlanta streets, her father's stories, grounding her. "You fight for those you love," she said, "for the ones who can't." The room erupted, cheers shaking the rafters, a girl hugging Mara, her hope a mirror to Mara's own. Outside, the town simmered. Karen Holt sat in her trailer, the blinds shut, her blonde hair loose, now streaked with gray, her eyes hollow with regret. She watched Mara's face on ABC, a pang of guilt. Had she destroyed a hero with a single call? The town's scorn had isolated her, her name a curse, but Mara's words on the screen stirred something, a need to act, to atone. She scribbled a note, her hands trembling, a confession she wasn't ready to share, but the weight of her silence was crushing. Merrow and Vance, jobless, faced their reckoning in a Baton Rouge courtroom, their trial dates set, the video a ghost haunting every step. They sat in Merrow's trailer, the TV replaying Mara's speech, their faces pale. Merrow's buzz cut was uneven, his hands restless. Vance stared at the floor, his bravado gone, guilt a heavy chain. Old complaints, brutality, slurs, had buried them, their names a stain on Mosswood's history. "We didn't mean it," Vance whispered, but the video, Mara's calm, her dignity, spoke louder, their shame a wound that would not heal. At Barksdale, Mara met with activists, their plans a wildfire, a national rally taking shape. A young organizer, Rosa Evans, gripped Mara's hand, her eyes fierce. "You're our voice," she said. Mara nodded, her heart full, her leadership a mantle she'd embraced. The Pentagon pressed in, Colonel Evelyn Ward's voice a steady call. "You're rewriting the system." Mara walked the base grounds, airmen saluting, their pride a shield. She thought of her daughter, a quiet vow to build a future where no child faced her pain. Lauren Hayes' stories kept the fire alive, her lens on Mosswood's divide, the choir's hope, the defenders' fading rage. The police department was a shell, DOJ oversight forcing resignations, Tate's legacy dust. Mara stood in her quarters, the Louisiana night thick, stars bright. A call came. A federal ruling was near, her lawsuit gaining ground, her movement swelling. Mosswood's reckoning was hers, and the truth was a blade, ready to cut deeper, a general standing at the heart of a nation's awakening. The federal courthouse in Baton Rouge thrummed with tension on February 25, 2025, as the nation awaited a ruling that would carve General Amara Brooks's name into history. Mara stood in a D.C. briefing room. Her suit she wore sharp, her brown eyes steady, a beacon of resolve in a storm. At 38, a four-star general, her short curls framed a face of defiance, her presence a testament to battles fought from a gas station lot to this moment of truth. The viral video of her arrest at Kelly's Fuel, now at 350 million views, had ignited a movement, its echoes in the thousands gathered outside, their signs a sea of hope, justice for Mara. Her fight was theirs, a fire that burned in every heart. The courtroom was a distant pulse, but its verdict reached Mara like a shockwave. Officers Travis Merrow and Kyle Vance were convicted, civil rights violations, unlawful detention, excessive force, their sentences a heavy toll. Prison time, 5 years, their badges stripped, their names a warning. The DOJ's probe had dismantled Mosswood's police department, mandating federal oversight, training, a new blood for a broken system. Mara watched the announcement on a secure screen, her hands clasped, her breath steady, a quiet victory settling in her chest. She thought of her grandmother, a civil rights marcher, her courage a thread weaving through this moment, a legacy of resilience unbroken. In Mosswood, the news split the town open, its square a mosaic of relief and rage. Protesters cheered, a choir's hymn soaring, but a few locals mourned, their voices faint, drowned by change. Lauren Hayes, 29, stood by the courthouse, her story, Mosswood's verdict, hitting NPR, its raw honesty a mirror to a town healing. Karen Holt, in her trailer, watched the ruling, her blonde hair loose, her eyes wet with tears of guilt and redemption. She'd confessed days ago, a letter to the local paper owning her call, her prejudice, her shame, a small act that joined her to the movement, a step toward atonement. She stepped outside, joining the crowd, her voice soft, but present, a whisper in the tide of change. Mara addressed the nation from D.C., her voice clear, a vision unwavering. "This ruling isn't just for me," she said, her words broadcast live on CNN, to protests in Seattle, vigils in Memphis. "It's for every voice silenced, every dignity denied. We fight on, together." The crowd roared, a digital wave. #Mara's legacy trending. On X, stories of reform pouring in, a flood of hope. She thought of her son, a vow to build a world worthy of him, her heart full, her fire fierce. In Mosswood, the police department's halls were quiet, new officers trained, under DOJ's watchful eye, a new chapter for a town. Tate's legacy was ash, his resignation a footnote. Mara's lawsuit had sparked policy changes, national training mandates, bias reviews, born, reforms taking root. She walked Barksdale's grounds, airmen saluting, their eyes proud, her mind a sanctuary. She honored her family, her heart, her father, her brother, their sacrifices a flame that lit her path. By dusk, the story was a global beacon, BBC, Reuters, a pulse of change. Mara stood, her quarters still, a call came, a rally planned, a national movement, challenges ahead. The victory was hers, but the fight was eternal's, a general's war for justice, a truth that reshaped a nation's soul, ready to burn brighter. Washington, D.C., vibrated with the pulse of a nation ready to rewrite its future on March 1, 2025. General Amara Brooks stood on a stage at the Lincoln Memorial, her khaki uniform crisp under the crisp spring sky, her brown eyes alight with unyielding resolve. At 38, a four-star general and a black woman, her short curls framed a face carved by courage, her medals glinting like embers of battles past. The viral video of her arrest at Kelly's Fuel and Food, now surpassing 400 million views, had sparked a movement that drew thousands to the mall. Veterans in faded caps, students with handmade signs, families clutching photos of loved ones lost to injustice. Their chant, "Mara Rising," rolled across the crowd, a tide of voices that stirred her soul. Mara had spent weeks planning this rally, her leadership a steady hand guiding a coalition of activists. Rosa Evans, a 24-year-old organizer with a fire in her eyes, had become her right hand, their late-night strategy sessions forging a vision of reform, new training mandates, community oversight, a justice system that saw every face. Mara stood backstage, her boots firm on the wooden platform, watching Rosa direct volunteers with a megaphone, her energy a spark. "This is for them," Mara murmured, thinking of her daughter, a 10-year-old who'd asked, "Mama, will they listen?" Mara's answer was this moment, a vow to build a world worthy of her child. The crowd was a mosaic of America, black, white, Latino, Asian, young and old, their signs a tapestry. Justice for Mara, see us all. On X, #MaraRally trended globally, posts flooding in from London to Lagos, stories of bias and hope weaving a digital chorus. Reporter Lauren Hayes, 29, stood at the crowd's edge, her camera crew capturing the scene, her latest story, the rally that changed America, streaming live on CBS. Her words cut sharp, framing Mara's fight as a turning point, a call to confront the nation's scars. Mara caught Lauren's eye, a nod of gratitude for a voice that had amplified her truth from Mosswood's dust to this stage. Back in Mosswood, Louisiana, the town was no longer a footnote but a symbol of redemption. A local contingent had driven 20 hours to join the rally, their church choir's bus parked nearby, their voices warming up with a hymn that carried over the Potomac. Karen Holt, 55, stood among them, her blonde hair catching the sunlight, her face softer now, free of the bitterness that had fueled her call to police months ago. Her public confession, a letter in the Mosswood Gazette owning her prejudice, had cost her friends but gained her purpose. She clutched a sign, "Mosswood stands with Mara," her presence a quiet atonement, her steps lighter in a town learning to heal. Not everyone embraced the change. A small knot of counter-protesters, barely 50 strong, gathered at the rally's fringe, their signs, "Defend Mosswood Pride," a fading echo of old loyalties. Their shouts, led by a grizzled man in a trucker hat, tried to disrupt, but the crowd's unity drowned them out, a sea of voices singing over their anger. Mara saw them from the stage, her gaze steady, her heart unshaken. She'd faced worse, desert ambushes, Pentagon skeptics, and knew fear couldn't outlast truth. Rosa leaned in, her voice low. "They're loud, but we're louder." Mara smiled, her resolve ablaze. "Let's show them." She stepped to the microphone, the crowd's roar a wave that lifted her. "America," she began, her voice clear, cutting through the spring air. "We stand here not to tear down, but to build up. Justice isn't a gift, it's a fight we win together." Her words were a spark, igniting cheers that shook them all. She spoke of her arrest, the cuffs, the weight of being unseen, her voice raw but unbroken. "I stood in Mosswood's dust, but you lifted me. You marched, you spoke, you saw me. Now, see each other." A veteran in the front row, his medals gleaming, saluted, tears in his eyes. A teenager waved a flag, her braids swinging, her hope a mirror to Mara's own. Mara outlined a vision, reforms born from her lawsuit, now law, bias training nationwide, DOJ oversight for troubled departments, a new standard for dignity. "This is our America," she said, her voice soaring. "We don't fear change. We fear silence." The crowd erupted, a thunderclap of unity, phones capturing every word, the moment a beacon for a world watching. In Mosswood, the choir sang louder, their hymn a bridge between past and future, Karen's voice joining, faint but true. The Pentagon watched, Colonel Evelyn Ward in a Barksdale command room, her gray eyes proud. "She's done it," she murmured, her call to D.C. confirming support. The White House had pledged funding for reform, a legacy taking root. But challenges loomed, budget fights, old guard resistance. And Mara knew this rally was a beginning, not an end. She stepped off the stage, Rosa hugging her, the crowd still chanting. Lauren's camera followed, her story a vow to keep the fire alive. Mara walked through the crowd, shaking hands, a grandmother pressing a rosary into her palm, a child drawing her a heart. She thought of her parents, their struggles, their pride, her heart full. The rally was a milestone, but the road ahead was long, her fight a commitment to every soul who'd marched. As dusk fell, the mall glowed, stars emerging, Mara's voice a spark that would burn on, a general leading a nation toward dawn. The Louisiana dawn painted Barksdale Air Force Base in gold on March 2, 2025, as General Amara Mara Brooks stood by her quarters window, her khaki uniform a quiet emblem of a journey that had reshaped a nation. At 38, a four-star general and a black woman, her short curls framed a face softened by hope, her brown eyes tracing the horizon where her fight had taken root. The viral video of her arrest at Kelly's Fuel and Food, a spark that had burned through 500 million screens, was now a distant echo, its legacy woven into laws, protests, and a country learning to see. Mara's medals, pinned to her chest, were a map of sacrifice, but her true mark was the movement she'd ignited, a light that would guide generations. The rally in D.C. had been a triumph, its echoes still rippling, thousands chanting, reforms pledged, a nation stirred. But Mara knew the work was far from done. She sat at a desk, papers spread before her, outlines of new battles, funding fights for training programs, resistance from small-town chiefs, skeptics in Congress. Her phone buzzed, Rosa Evans's name flashing, her voice bright. "We're planning the next rally, General. Atlanta, June. You in?" Mara smiled, her heart lifting. "Always," she said, her leadership a steady hand for a movement growing stronger. Mosswood, Louisiana, was no longer the town that had cuffed her. It had become a beacon of change, its streets alive with new voices. The local church choir, once a protest's heartbeat, now performed at schools, their songs a bridge to healing. Karen Holt, 55, had found her place among them, her blonde hair streaked with gray, her eyes clear of the fear that had once defined her. Her confession had cost her a life she'd known, but it gave her a purpose, volunteering at a community center, teaching kids to see beyond snap judgments. She'd mailed Mara a letter, simple words of gratitude. "You showed me how to be better." Mara kept it in her desk, a reminder that even the hardest hearts could turn. The Mosswood Police Department was reborn, its new officers trained under DOJ guidelines, their badges a promise of accountability. The town square, once a battleground, hosted forums where locals spoke of reform, their voices raw but hopeful. Lauren Hayes, 29, returned to document it. Her story, Mosswood's New Dawn, on NPR, her lens capturing a town learning to listen. She'd met Mara at Barksdale, their handshake a vow to keep telling the truth, Lauren's words a spark that kept the movement alive. Mara walked Barksdale's grounds, her boots steady on the tarmac, airmen saluting with a pride that warmed her. She paused by a memorial wall, names of fallen soldiers etched in stone, her fingers tracing her brother's name, lost to a protest's chaos years ago. His memory was her anchor, a vow to fight for those who couldn't. She thought of her parents, her father, a Vietnam vet who'd faced slurs, her mother, a nurse who'd defied hate, their courage her foundation. Her daughter, 10, had drawn her a picture, a general with a cape, taped to her wall, a reminder of why she fought. The Pentagon called, Colonel Evelyn Ward's voice a steady guide. "Your reforms are law," she said, her gray eyes proud over video. "National training, oversight boards. You've changed the game." Mara nodded, but her mind was on the gaps, rural departments, underfunded, resistant. She'd testified in D.C., her voice calm but fierce, pushing for more, her leadership a beacon. The White House had pledged support, but Mara knew change was a grind, each step a battle. By dusk, Mara stood on a Barksdale runway, AC-130 humming nearby, its roar a familiar comfort. The nation was quieter now, the viral storm settled, but her movement was a steady flame. Rallies planned, policies drafted, voices rising. On X, #MaraLegacy trended, stories of reform from towns like Mosswood, a digital map of change. She thought of a young airman who'd approached her, his salute sharp, his words simple. "You made me believe." Her heart swelled, her purpose clear. Mara looked to the stars, the Louisiana night vast, her daughter's laughter in her mind. The cuffs, the video, Mosswood's dust, they were her past, but this moment was her future, a vow to keep fighting. Her legacy was not in medals or headlines, but in the faces she'd inspired, the systems she'd reshaped, the hope she'd kindled. She turned back to her quarters, her steps firm, ready for the next call, the next rally, the next dawn. A general's work was never done, but Mara Brooks's light would burn forever, a guide for a nation finding its way.